Hi, thank you so much for joining us for Cherished Moments. My name is Rosina, and I am joined here by the Dr. Joy Hervey. She is an author, she is an entrepreneur, but what has her here today is that she is a mom. And so today we're going to talk about motherhood, grace, and work-life balance. So, Dr. Hervey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and a little bit about your family?
Sure. Well, first of all, Rosina, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm so excited that you're stepping out to do this project. So I have two little ones who are not little anymore. They're adults.
Yes.
One is 24 years old, and one just turned 23. I have an Easter baby and a Christmas baby.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, so we thought that our oldest, Emmanuel, would be born on the Y2K. But he wound up being born right before.
Oh, wow.
On December 27th of 1999. And both of my children are musicians, and they are gifted in that area. And so I feel so blessed that God has entrusted them to me to raise, and that we made it. We made it to adulthood. Hallelujah.
Yes. Well, I will say that you are indeed my point of reference. You know, your children are amazing. I've had the pleasure of watching them grow up just a little bit to where they are now. So thank you so much for, your example. So I understand you have businesses. So this shirt, Sisterhood is my superpower. That is a hard effort of Dr. Hervey. And may I call you Joy?
That's fine.
Okay, wonderful. So tell us a little bit about Genesis Ed, our t-shirt line, and anything else you might want to share.
Sure. So our business, Genesis Ed Solutions, is 25 years old. So that's probably our first child. Started soon after I got married, and we do consulting services for nonprofits, higher ed institutions, and government agencies, capacity building services like strategic planning and evaluation. And anigye is the brand that produces the Sisterhood shirt.
Nice.
And anigye is a brand that celebrates the creativity, beauty, and just all around loveliness of the diaspora. So it's a pleasure to have launched that brand last year, and you can find us at anigye.store.
Oh, awesome. Wonderful. So let's jump right in. So for me, Dr. Hervey, I admire your work-life balance, and for me, you're like the real life Claire Huxtable, or or you're one of those, mothers where from the outside looking in, we're asking how does she do it all. So for you, how does Grace show up as one who has many, ventures, and how do you trust God through it all? And being a mom when you were raising and rearing up children, how did Grace show up for you in that process?
Sure. Well, first of all, when you said that you wanted to talk to me about work-life balance, I thought that's an example of God having a sense of humor, because that really was not the story of my life at all. And so it's been a journey for me to arrive at a place of really valuing rest and self-care. And I don't usually talk about balance, because balance kind of implies that there's a precision of balancing, but I do talk about rhythm, and like the rhythm of working and loving and resting well and all those things that I think can be developed as a skill. But I tell you that really I was forced into work-life balance many years ago, in 2014 to be exact, so 10 years ago, when my body started to break down. Really autoimmune issues were plaguing me, and I was praying, I was doing all the things, right? I was praying, I had people pray for me, and I was praying for myself, and I was, going to doctors and all that, and nothing was working. And at a certain point, I had a conversation with my pastor, and I said, hey, I don't know what's going on. And he said, you need to learn how to cast your cares.
Oh, that's good.
And I didn't necessarily know how to do that. So it's interesting to get to a place in your life where you know you have to change, but you don't know how. And so for me, the grace that showed up in my life was in the form of a program called Celebrate Recovery.
Yes.
And what that introduced me to was a 12-step program that actually began with stepping out of denial and into grace.
Good.
And so the denial, really initially, my husband said, you're a workaholic. And I said, no, I'm not. And I got mad. How dare you say that? But then I had to reflect and think about the times in my life where, as I was experiencing right then, work had taken a toll. Work had become a drug of choice. And what's dangerous about work and activity is that, unlike other drugs, that are not socially acceptable, work gets you praise. Like if you work hard and you do a good job, then other people look and they applaud you, right? Not understanding the toll that that's taking. So that process of recovery began for me in 2014, and I just celebrated 10 years in recovery.
Yes, congratulations on that.
Yeah, so that was an exciting day. But one thing that I've learned is that a lot of times our need to always be doing comes from some other need in our lives, right? And so the value in self-reflection is that it's an opportunity for me to look not just at what I'm doing, but why. Why is it so important to me to be the first one in the office and the last one to leave? Why is it so important to me to not fail at a project? Why is it so important to me to make sure that every detail is done right? Nobody can do it like I do it, right? And so what I uncovered about myself is, and that for a lot of us, those needs are really rooted in childhood.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And in the messages that we get about what is valuable, what people celebrate, what makes us special, what makes us valuable. And so unlearning all of that was really an act of grace.
Wow. That's awesome. So in that, how would you say that affected your motherhood, and when did grace step in that process to have that rhythm?
Yeah, so I found it essential to establish a Sabbath, a true Sabbath. And so where that shows up in family is helping everyone understand that this is important, right? And that this is a day when mom is not working, right? So first I have to convince myself that it's okay, right, to take a day. And then the grace is actually enlisting the help of everyone in the household to say, what can we do on the day before my Sabbath or the 2 days before my Sabbath that will keep not just me, but all of us from having to work, right? So that the Sabbath can become a family practice. Because God instituted the Sabbath, right? It's not optional. It's not something that people came up with. But God rested. And why did he rest? Certainly not because he was tired and needed to rest. Right. But I believe that God rested to show us the value of rest, right? And so instituting that is really an act of grace. Another act of grace is learning, for me, was learning to accept help. Right?
That's good.
And so the level of help that we have access to kind of varies with, where we are in life and income level and all kinds of different things. But the fact is that God provides help for all of us, but it's a choice as to whether we accept it or not, right? So for me, one example is we had some friends early on that had a housekeeper. They had it like that. And they were like, we want to gift you our housekeeper. I think I was pregnant. So our kids are 15 months apart. I think we have one that's pregnant with another one. And so, that whole process of having someone come in and help me around the house was something that I didn't grow up with that, so it's like, well, I should be able to do this myself. But God had to work with me to say, if help is available, then why not receive it?
Right.
Why feel guilty for receiving help? And that can be receiving help from your third party. That can be receiving help from my partner around the house. Because sometimes we have partners that want to help, but we just say, oh no, I should be doing this. It's my job. Meanwhile, God is like, hey, accept the help. Or our kids are old enough, to begin doing their own laundry. Like that was a huge transition in my house. It's like, look, they can do this. They're in middle school. They can separate their clothes, and if they get it wrong and something fades, it's not the end of the world. So it's like, okay, this is now your job.
Oh, wow. I love that. And so, having teenagers myself, that's big.
Exactly. And so sometimes we're doing things that we think we need to do, and we don't need to do them.
Right.
And the grace is God showing up with help and us having the willingness to accept and receive the help. right? When it shows up.
Yeah.
So there's grace in that. I think another bit of grace is being able to tell the truth when we're overwhelmed.
Yes. Yeah.
Having somebody who doesn't see the church face, you know, or the strong black woman face, or the I have it all together face.
Yeah.
But somebody that we can just be like, you know what, this is just too much, and I just want to just hide in my closet right now. And they say, okay, go ahead, go ahead. I'll keep an eye out on the kids while you do that and have your moment, right?
Yeah.
Because we all have moments where we just need to express emotion.
Can you say that in the camera? Because I feel like there's a woman that may need to hear that, a mother that needs to hear that we all have moments.
We all have moments. And sometimes we have whole days. And it's like, you know, I always laugh now because, like I said, my kids are musicians, right? I like peace and quiet. They like to sing 24/7. And, you know, when we're driving around, you know, driving to school, from school, to the next activity, to church, from church, at a certain point, I just wanted some peace and quiet.
Right, yeah.
And that's okay.
And that is okay, yes.
And it's okay to say, you know what, I love my kids, but I'm really glad they're not here right now. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and we need people in our lives that we can just be real with, because I'm learning a lot about emotional wellness right now.
That's good. And
really, emotional wellness is being able and willing to express our emotions, the full range of emotions, and understand that that is a part of the human experience. And Jesus did it.
Yep.
And He was so powerful.
That's it.
You know, so we can do that.
Amen. So when you were talking, Psalms 23 came to mind. You know, Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. And so it's like, if we allow Him to, right, He will give us the rest, you know, that rhythm of grace that we need to mother, you know, to rest, and without guilt and all those things. So,
that's so true. And, you know, one thing I love about that psalm is it's super real about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And when He says, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, you know, I think about the other Psalms, you know, where the psalmist does talk about being fearful, does talk about running for his life, does talk about being angry, you know, so the I will fear no evil is not necessarily a denial of the emotion of fear, but it is a declaration that I will. He's speaking to himself. He's preaching to himself that I will not fear. I will not walk in fear. But that doesn't mean that he didn't experience the emotion of fear.
That's so good.
And so I think sometimes, you know, we don't allow ourselves the grace to really express the full range of our emotion. And what happens when we don't is that it's still there. It's not like it goes away, but it's displaced. It can eat us up from the inside, right, and create health issues and all kinds of other issues. When if we would just accept the grace that it gives us to really be open, then that would help us to be free.
I agree. So counseling. You know, Dr. Hervey, Joy mentioned Celebrate Recovery. So it's okay to reach out for help. You know, we do the spiritual things. We cast our care. We cast our anxiety, our worry on God. But there are practical things that we also need to do to experience God's grace as mothers. So if I could ask, going back to when, you know, you were embarking on your mothering journey, when your kids were maybe toddlers, or you were like in the thick of, you know, just when everything is just happening. What advice would you give yourself concerning finding a rhythm, maintaining a rhythm, and giving yourself grace?
Sure. So God recently actually began to minister to me about being like a child. And my reflection was that we give a whole lot of grace and compassion to our children, right? And that because we do that, they are able to walk through life unfettered and free. Like, they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They don't know how they're going to get from point A to point B. But they have confidence that mom's got it.
Right.
Dad's got it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever adult is responsible for them
Right.
is going to get them where they need to go. And so, even as we grow and we have responsibility for little ones, God still wants us to be like children.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that we don't have to take on the pressure of having to figure it all out.
That's so good.
So in the same way that our kids, hold our hand and allow us to lead them wherever they're going, God wants us to be like that with Him. And so if we just take that attitude and perspective, I believe that helps us to avoid a lot of the pressure and anxiety that actually leads to overwork and overactivity. Because I know for me, a lot of the motivation for that is if I don't do it, it won't be done. If I don't, it's fear-based.
Yeah.
If I don't coordinate this, if I don't control every detail, if I don't work from sun up to sundown, then this won't be done, and then what will happen?
Right. Yeah.
But God is inviting us to trust Him and to say, if I don't get that last dish done, then the world will not fall apart. God will make sure that what needs to get done gets done without me damaging my own well-being.
Yeah, that's so good.
And then the other piece of it is letting go of what people think.
It's
because
huge.
I think a lot of times our identity is so wrapped up in being a good mom, or being a good wife, or being a good partner. And so much of that expectation we think is based on what we do.
Wow.
And so if one of the reasons we're working so hard is that we don't want people to look at us and say, she's not a good mom. She's not a good wife.
Or comparison to others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then we wind up, on a hamster wheel, running a race that we can never win. Because there's always somebody out there who's the perfect Instagram mom and makes all her kids, lunches, breakfast, and
From
dinners
scratch.
from scratch. Right. She will always be there.
Yeah.
With her carefully curated.
And no offense to the moms who do that.
And if that's you, God bless you. But even for you, there's somebody who's a better Instagram mom, right?
Yeah.
And so that pressure, we just releasing that pressure of my identity being wrapped up in what I do versus my identity being, hey, I'm a daughter of the Most High God, and God cares about me as His child more than He cares about me being a good mom or a good wife.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So thank you so much, Dr. Hervey Joy, for joining us today and sharing your heart as it concerns grace and motherhood. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Subscribe.